Right, I'm Tina. My business is called Forest School Plus. My sort of background is, well, I've been a bit of a portfolio career. Started off as an environmental sciences ecologist, became a librarian, became a primary teacher, did forest school training, set up my own business called Forest School Plus, and had to learn quite a bit about Stone Age to Iron Age in the process. This is Ian. He's my archaeologist. He's my husband for many years, and he, in a previous life, for many years was principal archaeologist for West Yorkshire Archaeology Service. Now is an independent consultant, and luckily supports me in a lot that I do. So it's really down to him now. You're going to do a presentation on the astounding invention of Stone Age to Iron Age, which will hopefully be
smaller. Basically, they're the same style of thing. They all have a sort of chopping side, a slightly sharper end for making holes or something, and sharp edges. And these would have probably been multi-purpose tools. We don't know that, but I'm guessing they were. We always like to show these things in action, and the obvious thing to do is a bit of vegetable or fruit, like an apple, just to demonstrate, in case there was any doubt about it, that a piece of stone with a sharp edge could cut through an apple. Some children don't believe you until you show them. So we do a bit of food processing. That's quite a messy apple. How long have we had that? Right. Well, that's not to use the good stuff. Where these are less effective, of course, is if you want to chop wood. Now, by the time we get to the Mesolithic, people are chopping quite a lot of branches of this size to make shelters as they move around the landscape following the herds. And a tool like this, of course, can chop wood, or being flint, can chew through wood. But it's not easy on the hand, and it's not easy on the arm, and if you're having to chop a lot of those, even I know I haven't got Mesolithic hands, but even my modern hands are feeling it already. So sometimes this is a long discussion point, which we try to help the kids work with, but somebody usually comes up with the idea that a handle would be a good idea. And a handle is a good idea, and we talk about what might be the best types of handle and how you might get them. And the best handles tend to be branches which are forked, and you chop them off underneath and trim them to the size you want, and then trim that bit, and then you've got something which you can attach a blade to. And this is what happened in the Mesolithic. Now, a typical Mesolithic axe looks like that. It's not much, but there's some important aspects to this. It's a flat base to which you can attach it to the handle, a dorsal bit at the back where it sort of rises up, that makes sure it's got lots of strength, and then the important bit, the blade. Now, these are called tranchet axes, and the reason they're called tranchet is because that's the French word for slice. And it's the slice they take off. They create a flint that size, and then skillfully they whack off a slice that leaves a really sharp edge. And that is the axe. That's the cutting edge of the axe. Now that will wear out over time because that's not a retouched edge. And then as it gets blunter, they'll whack another slice off until the axe becomes too small to be hafted. How do you attach it to the axe handle? Well, these are two tranchet style axes. You can see the forked sticks, branches, and the material that's been used to hold them onto the handles is an animal product which not many children really, children with dogs know about it. because it's rawhide. And so, of course, my source of rawhide is the pet shop, because I can unravel rawhide dog chews, soak them in water, and they become all soft and soggy. Rawhide in its dried state, straight off the animal, put out to dry, is rock hard. You can't do much with that. You cut it into strips. Once it's soaked for half a day, it goes all soggy. It's a bit like bacon rind. And then you can use it.
So what is rawhide? Is it the skin of
It's
an
the
animal?
skin, the untreated skin,
Okay.
not made into leather,
Right.
just
Right.
stripped.
And they give that to dogs to chew on?
Yeah.
I'm not a dog owner.
They'd stretch it out on a rack, and they'd use flints with rounded ends like this to scrape the skin to get all the goo and the hair off. They use rounded end scrapers because if you had a square-ended one, it would rip the skin, and you don't want that to happen.
To make it into leather, they put a paste of the brain of the animal. You take on the hide here.
Yeah?
Sorry, can you say that again? I didn't hear you.
In order to go from rawhide to leather, you need to put, like it's called, tell the kids, it's a magic paste. It's actually made from the brain of the animal that you've killed. And you only need, like, if you have one deer hide, you only need one brain.
Various types of glue, usually pine resin or birch bark, and to hold it in. It doesn't need that because it cracks ultimately, but if you can wedge it in, every time you hit it, it just gets firmer in. Of course, you've got more control now because you can chop down, you can also chop up. Gives you more control. Consider these as bigger axes, and you can imagine how one or two Neolithic woodsmen over a day or two could take down quite a large tree.
But where have these been found across Europe?
Yes,
All over Europe?
yes.
And down into Africa?
I imagine so. I'm not an expert on African archaeology.
Yeah. And what about the flints? Is the
Flint, you're not going to get flint everywhere.
No.
So in the Mediterranean you find obsidian, and even in this part of the world where there's no flint, you find chert. Yeah, you find chert and other things.
Yeah.
But I'll talk in a minute about other materials and how you substitute
okay.
for not having flint.
Yeah, that.
By the time you get to Neolithic, there's definitely people in this country.
Yeah.
And the museum.
So we've found tools that can help us clear the way to make our products, our agricultural products, and fields for animals, fields for crops. We don't dwell too much on that because we're usually doing this in about the same length of time I'm talking to you. So we have to sort of try and link things on and talk about the different types of tools that people would have had to come up with once they started growing their own cereal crops. And of course, one of the key ones is a sickle. Can you get me that arrow? This is a sickle with a curved wooden handle. It's got a notch cut in it, and placed in the notch are, in this case, 9 small razor sharp pieces of flint. It's a composite blade. It's very difficult to create a flint blade that's curved, but you can do it with using lots of pieces. And it's held in place by a pine resin and charcoal glue. Pine resin, you see it oozing out of pine trees. It goes hard. It's very sticky to touch, but it's usually hard and you can break it off. If you heat it by the fire, it melts and becomes a gooey glue. When it cools again, it's still brittle. But if you mix it with powdered charcoal while it's hot, when it sets, it's hard. It's like an araldite arrangement. One's a hardener, one's a glue. This is not a Neolithic technology. This was in use from Mesolithic times. People were sticking arrowheads onto arrows with it. And again, it is very efficient. The important point we try to make is that You don't throw away your old technology just because you've invented something new. If it still works, keep with it. And we'll see that again with the Bronze Age. Okay, so let's see if this works. It is razor sharp. We usually don't have long grass to play with, but we have today. So it is very sharp, and we would never ever pass this around a group, even if we had some plasters.
So, if they knew about that, why did they ever use that glue to, when you bound the axe head
Yeah.
to the thing with that skin, would they have used the glue?
Well, I've seen
as
people
well
demonstrate that it can be done. I don't think
to
anybody's
make
ever
it
found
more
it.
longer lasting.
Well, I would argue that I had an axe, that big axe was originally glued, but every time you hit anything with it, the glue cracked.
Right, I
So
see.
it's not
see.
practical in
'Cause
that,
it's brittle.
in that
Okay,
respect.
yeah. Right.
I can see that when people use it to glue in a wadding into the hole in the handle, it might work. It's wedged in firmly,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
just as
I see.
as an adhesive to hold an axe, which is under a lot of stress every time you're chopping a tree, it doesn't really work. So the next stage with the children is that we've got a crop, we've got the grain, we've dried it, and then we're going to do something with it. Now this is the, I suppose this is the beginnings of a saddle quern, if we used it often enough. It's a rubbing stone on a stone, and this is rye, I think, isn't it? It's rye? Barley, I'm sorry. And you'd be surprised at what the kids think coming out of this. Some of them have been fixated on the fact that flint comes from chalk, so naturally what's coming out of these seeds must be chalk.
Funny how kids' minds
I know.
work, isn't
It's
it?
quite a regular one, isn't it?
Well, I think they often do a little bit of introductory geology alongside doing the Stone Age, so it's sort of fixed in their head.
Yeah. So anyway, when they work out that it's actually flour, all well and good, that's a bit of an education. It's difficult to demonstrate how continued use of a stone like this over generations would actually wear it down and create the classic saddle quern shape. And there's no way I can demonstrate that in my lifetime. But that's something they're going to have to accept. So, it's as far as we blunt end for hammering. So it's used as an axe and a hammer. So you know the name of this one. Part axe, part hammer.
Axe hammer.
Axe hammer, whatever.
Well done. Axe hammer. So it's an axe hammer.
I was too frightened.
It's an axe hammer. Now, that's great. It's brilliant. I made that. I made both of them, in fact. I can actually tell you that to drill a hole through that using traditional methods took me 5 hours contact time, about 5 weeks with breaks for blisters to go down and the bones to heal. So how do you make a hole in a stone? This is the big question. And I always ask the children this, and they look dumbfounded until you say, well, how would you make a hole in a stone today? What would you use?
A drill.
What?
Yeah, a drill.
A drill, of course that's what you'd use. That is the answer. That is the answer. So we need a prehistoric drill. We'll use this one, I think.
Black and decorate.
So this is a stone which we've been having a go at. And this is a bit of wood.
Oh, a bit of wood.
A bit of wood.
Amazing. Oh, it just
And if I do that, I always say to the kids, what's going to wear out fastest, the stone or the wood?
The hand. The hand.
What?
Your hand.
The hands. No, that wasn't one of the options. So it's the stone or the wood. And of course the answer is the wood is going to wear out fastest. We're missing something. We're missing the cutting part of this tool. And the cutting part of it is something that's readily available, especially if you live near the coast. More readily available than flint. Get into it. Here it is. So what we're putting in here is sand. Sand is made up of all the very tough, hard bits of mineral that the sea has not been able to dissolve. So therefore it is very hard stuff. If it's been around so long it's not been dissolved by the sea, it's certainly going to be good enough to grind way through the stone. And so, if you can hear it, you might hear a different sound now.
Grinding.
And so then the question is, what's wearing out fastest? The wood, the stone, or the wood and the stone? Yeah, that's right, there's both. It's not a trick question. This is very soft sandstone. But if you don't have soft sandstone, you can't demonstrate it quick enough in the time you have available. So you've got to find something which demonstrates what you're trying to say. So that's one type of drill. If you're a prehistoric person lucky enough to have acquired a small piece of flint, you can make a flint tip drill. And this time, I might start a new hole for this one. This time things happen a lot quicker. The flint is very tough and the stone is very soft.
Yeah, well, that's going faster, isn't it?
So I've made that hole just in that put.
Yeah.
If you really, really want to get technological,
Blimey.
we can make a power drill. Where's that gone? Oh yeah. All we have to do, nope, other way. Engage that.
Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh, they
You get the
learn to do
idea.
that.
You get the idea. I won't persevere with that. It's too long. Okay. So we can drill holes in stones.
Right.
And that brings me to you, technology. Flint technology lasted all the way through the Bronze Age. People gradually started to use bronze for some tools, usually high prestige tools. The early ones were these flat axes, typical of a flat axes. Spear is a tanged spear, it's not a sucketed one, uses less metal. Very thin, easy to cast, easy to haft. These were the things that were probably owned not by woodworkers, more likely to be owned by chieftains or important people, and these were the things they took to their graves, buried in their barrows. Now, that changed as the Bronze Age went on, because they started to discover socketed technology.
So,
Where
can
you
I
can-
just ask, if these were owned by chieftains, what did they use them for?
Well, fighting probably, and prestige.
Okay, because it's a tool, but I can't imagine chieftains
weapon.
doing much work.
A weapon.
Oh, it's a weapon.
It's a tomahawk, effectively, isn't it? It's what you'd expect to see an American Indian using. These socketed axes are a totally different beast. There's more metal. They've learned how to cast hollow tools that can be placed over the handle. So like a socketed spear, it means that when you have impact, it makes them go on firmer. They're not going to work loose. They've cast loops as well on these axes, which for a long time, the sole purpose was thought to be just to tie them on. I think there's a different reason and purpose to this. I think it was so that they could have them as fast release tools. Have you all heard of, or any of you heard of Must Farm?
Right?
They called it the Pompeii of the British Bronze Age.
All right, yeah, yeah. Telly.
It was a village on stilts in a lake in the Bronze Age, late Bronze Age, which caught fire and collapsed very quickly, which meant that all the tools, all the fabrics, cordage, anything organic collapsed into the silts underneath the huts and was preserved. All the axes had their handles, so that solved a few issues. There was fabrics and all sorts of things.
Yeah, and like little balls of, I think it was probably nettle and linen,
Yep.
yarn.
So one of the things it showed us was that some of the axes were hafted like this, with the handle has got two wooden components and one metal one. So that was probably used conventionally as a chopping tool, as we've seen before. Very effective at this as well. But the other thing it opened up was that some of these Bronze Age socketed axes were hafted in a totally different way, or one was at least, and that had an arrangement like this, which was rather unexpected. And it could well be that these loops will enable people to take the axes off and put them on different handles. Like a socket set today has one handle and lots of sockets. This has got one socket and lots of different handles. So the handle like this might be more usefully used as a splitting wedge rather than as a conventional axe. It certainly explains the width of the axes. They are broad. They're not thin bladed tools at all.
The photos I've taken so far I've only had Ian's. Anybody, I won't take photographs of anybody if you don't want me to take photographs. People okay or not?
Yeah.
We like to try and keep themes going, so because we had a sickle in the Neolithic, we certainly have a sickle in the Bronze Age. These sickles in bronze are not very common. There's not many of them known throughout the country. They only come in the late Bronze Age, and there's some debate as to whether they're actually used for some sort of ritual purpose rather than for getting the crops in. They do of course work, although I would say you can't get much of a draw on them because they're so hooked. It could well be that they weren't really as good at cutting the crops as we would think. The later ones tend to be, or the final ones tended to be socketed, like most tools were in the Bronze Age, but they're all late Bronze Age phenomenon. And of course, because socketed axes were the last Bronze Age type of axe, they were of course the first Iron Age type of axe, although you won't find many of them in the archaeological record in this country, known mainly from Europe. They're sort of the beginning of the chisel, this sort of thing, because like that, it's more like a chisel and works very good as a chisel. Of course you can interchange that, it could be an adze, it could be an axe. These type of axes didn't last very long because by the Middle Iron Age everybody was using these. And this is quite a development away from sockets. You think sockets are quite durable, socketed spears carried on, but they started creating sleeves, holes in the object they could pull over the handle and then just stick a wedge in the end. And these were so effective that they saw us through the Iron Age right up to the present day. If you go to B&Q, you're looking for something like that. Yeah. Probably got a plastic handle now, but it's definitely something like that. And these have not changed. They're the best we can do for axes. I said I didn't think the bronze sickles were probably used for crops, but the current thinking is that flint probably did the job for most of the harvesting right up to the Iron Age. The Iron Age is the first period really where flint does not feature in the record as a tool. The only place you're probably using flint was for firelighting. And this is an interesting development, I suppose, in the way we think now. If a flint tool broke, you had to start again from scratch and get some more flint. The metal tool gets blunt, you can just resharpen it until you can't sharpen it anymore. Then it goes back in the forge and the blacksmith will make a new one. This is recycling beginning. This is the beginning of recycling. No, it's too grass. There you go. I haven't got any big long grass left. Anyway, you don't need me to demonstrate this because we all know it works. Of course, it was the beginning also of the industrial period, I suppose, the Iron Age. The Iron Age smiths were so adept at making things they could replicate everything that was made in flint in iron, and iron could be reused. So we have got recycling, but we've also got some mucky industry that goes along with it. The other thing about the Iron Age is the processing of the corn, or the wheat. We have new technology there by the late Iron Age with the use of the rotary quern. There's a bottom stone, a top stone, a spindle thing, two handles and a hole in the top. Round here, in this part of the world, these dome-shaped querns are what was used, and they're known as beehive querns because they're shaped like a traditional beehive, not because they're anything to do with bees. So what happens is the grain goes in the hopper in the top, and rotate it. Might want to do it like that, or perhaps you can do it like that. Works both ways. And eventually the grain is being ground and the flour makes its way to the edges, and if we were doing this properly to catch the flour, we'd have this in a big trough so that we didn't lose it all in the grass. But wholemeal this, it's quite big bits, but you can see what's happening. I mean, I haven't loaded up the quern so that there's a throughput yet, but right. That's probably an important development, that, because the Romans took it on to a new level. They had flat querns, but they also started using horse-driven ones as well on a larger scale. The Roman ones actually had they were flat querns, but they had bits cut out so they didn't weigh much, so they weren't heavy to carry on manoeuvres. Right, I said flint wasn't used in the Iron Age except possibly for lighting fires, so it's only appropriate.
Do you want to give people a chance to go into the houses?
Oh yeah, well, I'll get the fire ready.
Gives you a bit of a break.
Okay.
Been sat down a long time.
It seems appropriate to light a fire, so I'll get that ready if you want to.
We called this, it started with a piece of flint.
Yeah.
We had a little lad
Oh,
who was
yeah.
just so engaged and really on the ball with questions and answers. And he just suddenly went, well, it just all started with a piece of flint. And I just, yeah,
Oh, that's where you got it from.
yeah. So I'm blessed I didn't get his name, and I hadn't decided to do this at that point, so I can't give him, you know, credit. Oh, sorry.
Yes. We always do a fire. Now, you're probably wondering why I have developed a Jenga fire. It's not the normal way you light a fire, but it does have the added advantage that the children can see what I'm doing. And also at one point, before COVID, we used to have them involved in doing it. Our two nominated druids would preside over the fire and help light it. We don't do that at the moment. So, have a piece of flint, iron striker. I will claim that I did make that myself. Blacksmith. And it's called a striker. If you strike the flint, you get sparks. Now I need, that's the spark energy is what's going to light the fire. I need to get it into the top of this fire here, where all my tinder, bits of grasses and fibres, dry fibres are. And I'm probably not going to be able to do it like that, because by the time any sparks reach it, they'll be too cold. So I'm going to catch a spark while it's still got all its energy on a piece of this partly burnt linen. You want to know where to get partly burnt linen from? You go to Tesco's, you buy a tea towel, and then you reduce it in a sealed tin over a fire. And then you hold it next to the flint and then strike again, and hopefully a spark will land on it and I'll get us lember. Then
Yes, brilliant.
right, and it's that which I'll poke in the top, and then I'll do it like we do it with the class, because we're talking about bellows then, and why did people need bellows technology in the Iron Age and the Bronze Age? What did they need this for?
The bellows technology developed in the Bronze Age because you need a lot of heat in order
How
to
did they light the fire before they got the iron?
That's
Heat
exactly
to
what
light
I was
the
going to
flint?
ask.
While you're distracted by that fire, I will make a meal of trying to show you. Everybody's, all the children anyway, are really taken with the idea that you can make fire by rubbing two sticks together, naturally. Keep going. Okay. Now,
In there.
what they fail to consider when they've been told about rubbing two sticks together, that it is a friction fire.
Lots of heat for the bronze.
Basically, it's a fire drill. You've probably seen these.
Oh yes.
You've seen fire drills?
Yes.
Yeah. So lots of components. It's all important. This is the hearth. It's a piece of lime wood. Lime has not got the very compact structure, so it's quite loose, fibrous. That's hazel, very bendy. And there's my drill. These are hazel drills. Not the one I want. That's the one I want. And then the top piece is hornbeam. And that's a very dense wood. And that's going to be the bit on the other end. Now I do not want that to catch fire, so that's why I stick a bit of wet grass in it as well.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I should think my success rate with this is probably 50%, so it may not happen. It's not a very warm day, very damp, so That's not to say that people didn't light fires when it was a bad day. They must have done. Why isn't that fire going?
I suppose the trick is to keep the fire going once you've lit it. Keep it in, then you don't have to keep lighting one every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep animals away as well.
Okay. So, if this is going to work, I'm going to put this piece of leather under here. I've got a partly started drill hole with a notch cut out. I'm going to drill into that hole, and I'm going to make hot coal or powder, and that's going to fall through the notch onto the leather, and hopefully it'll get hot enough to start another ember. And if I get that ember going, I'll be able to put it into this little nest. With that of straw, and hopefully get another fire going. What was it? Birch bark. Right. Okay, let's see.
Give it another magic flow before.
Yeah. Right. We should get smoke at the very least. It's an anticlimax. It is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Grass.
Oh yeah. See the smoke.
They needed to be fit, didn't
I suppose they needed to be fit to live, didn't they?
Black dust, and then if it's hot enough, it'll stick together, and you'll get the red ember, and that's called coal.
So was he a Boy Scout when he was?
Pardon?
Was he a Boy Scout when he was young?
No, he wasn't actually. Oh, yes, the coat.
Looks like, you know.
There is an ember there.
What you can't do is you can't blow on it because it's made of dust. It just will. To be.
You've got to feed it.
Hmm?
Oh, it's got to go.
I've got a glowing red ember.
Wow.
I've got good timber.
Blimey, incredible. Well done.
another day now.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Brilliant.
Oh wow. Got so quiet inside as well. Is this what it would be like inside a Neolithic roundhouse?
Come on, Dad. Look at that cobweb. Room. I'm just watching that cobweb. Don't put that spider on there.
No, I noticed the cobwebs as well.
That's it, that's it. Alright. Pretty expensive to make, aren't they? To say it's all natural. Yeah. £30,000. Well, you think that they've got to keep it. Yeah. Keep it. But
Pretty cool.